Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Sustainable Synthetic Turf Surfaces for Leading Edge Design, brought to you by GreenBuild and sponsored by SYNLawn. I'm Sherida Sessa, GreenBuild's brand director, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. In just a moment, you'll be hearing from Rob Dant, Director of Commercial Sales at SYNLawn. But before we begin, let me explain how you can participate in the presentation. First of all, if you have any technical difficulties during the session, please press the Help button on your screen to receive assistance in solving common issues. If at any time you're having audio difficulties, simply hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. We welcome your questions throughout the webinar and will answer as many as possible at the end. In order to submit questions to our presenter, simply type your question into the question window on the left-hand side of your screen and then hit the Submit button. Please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available beginning tomorrow. You'll be notified by email when the recording is available. And now, to kick off our presentation, I'd like to hand the mic over to our presenter from SYNLawn. Rob, the floor is yours.
Hello and welcome. My name is Rob Dant. I'm with a company called SYNLawn, and I want to extend my appreciation to GreenBuild and on all the behind-the-scenes work that goes into putting webinars like this together. So thank you first and foremost, and also the audience for listening. Sustainability is a kind of a hot button issue these days. It's often packed with a lot of meaning and a lot of emotion. And we're going to be talking about it specifically as it relates to our industry, which is synthetic turf. Synthetic turf is a relatively new material. It's been on the market for just a few decades, and certainly over the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen much more application and use of it. And in a variety of industries, which is also important. So thank you. And so let's go ahead and begin here, and I appreciate your time today. So sustainability, what do we mean by that? Well, first of all, it's frequently used in a very broad way and can sometimes diminish the intent behind it. Secondly, industries will use it differently and often for sales gains. It's just pure marketing, if you will. It's often laden with emotional impact more than as a business model that works, right? After all, who doesn't want to be sustainable? Fourth, the quantification can be very difficult as accurate models are needed at the outset. So for example, at my home, I don't irrigate or water my yard. And so coming in and saying that there'll be a water savings really doesn't mean a whole lot to me, right? But if you're a commercial entity, a hotel, let's say, and you know what those fixed costs are or those operating costs to either resod or cut the grass or to fertilize or use pesticides, et cetera, you have a very strong understanding of the inputs required. Next, the products need to work in concert with the systems for real value. So I can't just wave my product around and say it's the best in the world and it saves the planet. It really fits into a larger whole, and this is also very important. We have some key segments of business such as rooftops, for example. And so synthetic turf doesn't have to go on a rooftop, but by adding it and creating a system, you can create value and extend the use of that building, the square footage of that building with an attractive space that increases tenancy or creates real value for residents there. Lastly, leadership and stewardship are equally powerful terms. So, we practice the stewardship, environmental leadership for a number of years, since 2008, quite frankly, with some of our soy-based backings. And these are very important to us. And so we fit into the sustainability equation in that regard as well. So synthetic turf has really been around since 1965. It got its start in the athletic world, and actually our sister company, AstroTurf, lays claim to that with the completion of their first project in the Houston Astrodome in 1965. People recognized that it had value, certainly for athletics and games and not having rainy days and such. But synthetic turf quickly was adopted to provide deep shade solutions such as this. And as the industry expanded into Some of where our more mature markets are, such as Arizona, Nevada, California, Texas, and then on to Florida, people really began to appreciate the value and the benefits that synthetic turf has, even over natural grass, believe it or not. So it's really extended into arenas such as these urban design complexes. This is a rooftop system. You'll see the little walkway there is actually composed of synthetic turf. It has a restaurant and uses some of our antimicrobial turf, putting greens that mimic natural putting greens, and so on and so forth. So they can be quite complex. So what are we going to cover today? Sustainability, of course, but we're going to break this down into sustainable systems, sustainable products, sustainable programs, and sustainable projects. And we'll cover each of these because they all kind of work in concert. So sustainability, what does it mean, right? Well, a real quick definition is the capacity to endure in a relatively ongoing way across various domains of life. Okay, so a lot of words in there. In the 21st century, it generally refers to the capacity of Earth's biosphere and human civilization to coexist. It is also the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level and the avoidance of the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain an ecological balance. So many of us are familiar with solar panels and the expensive solar plant panels, or maybe wind turbines that are put in areas of the country or off the shore that can create other kinds of difficulties or challenges. And so sustainability is a big word that has a lot packed into it. And what we've been finding in our industry is that because of the nature of what we do and the kinds of projects that we have, sustainability often has a lot of ties to wellness, whether it's children or healthcare or even hospitality. And we'll discuss that as we move on. So what's our credentials? Who are we anyways, right? Why should you guys care, about SYNLawn and what we're trying to talk about? Well, first of all, we are the largest U.S.-based domestic manufacturer. This is confirmed by third-party sources, so it's not just us waving the flag. We have extensive ASTM testing, compliance data, and safety documentation. So this is very important as well. So think back to what I was saying a moment ago about it being a replicable system, right? If you don't have those kind of components, then all your projects just come to a screeching halt. We have a very strong systems-based approach. We recognize it's just not our product, but we fit into a larger whole, and we'll talk about base material and infill and some things like that in a few moments. Because of our size, we also bring higher quality controls and material standards to the plate. In last year with the pandemic year, we saw this in particular as people were scrambling to find raw materials, where do they get sourced and how qualitative are they? Finally, an innovation drive. We are, again, a U.S.-based manufacturer, and so it's very important to us that we keep on adding bells and whistles that make sense. A lot of times we'll talk about the automotive industry because, if you had backed up the clock 10 years ago and said, gee, what if we put a backup camera in here, right? Or 30 or 40 years ago and you started talking about heated seats or air conditioning even, or automatic windows. All of those are really kind of, new crazy things that have eventually adopted and become part of what we would consider a modern vehicle today. We are also forwardly and vertically integrated. We have 100 offices in our network, plus 19 countries that we sell into. We also have a U.S. plant that is has both manufacturing and warehousing under one roof, and this is really, really unusual in our business. So those things are very important. You bring a lot of expertise in terms of design, in terms of the synthetic turf styles and configurations that we have, and then you're all able to control that under one warehouse and manufacturing plant. In terms of brand credibility, we have over 82 million square feet of soy-backed turf that we've sold since 2008, and we've existed since before 2008. It's just a good benchmark for us. We have over 200,000 projects under our belt, many of them being residential, but a lot with being commercial as well. And this commercial segment is very important to us. We're found in 9 commercial segments. They're very diverse. They can range from military to hospitals or healthcare to senior living, hospitality, and even the military. And in every segment of business is going to have a different layer of interest or point of entry, conversations, budgets, things of that nature. And then finally, our demonstrable industry leadership. So we really hitch our wagon to USDA, United Soybean Board as well. So those are two key partnerships for us as we really approach synthetic turf as a plant-based or soy-based product. So you'll see that we have 12 approved USDA systems. This is very powerful for us, and it allows us to get into key federal projects and even municipal projects as well. As such, we've received a number of Synthetic Turf Council awards, including ones for NASA, House of Representatives, and even some key dog parks and really cool projects that we'll talk about as we move forward as well. So those awards are very important to us because they represent the best of the best within our industry. Product innovations and constructions. So we introduced the 100-ounce product, which is a very lush product. We introduced the soy-based backings, the sugarcane fibers into what we do. In 2020, we launched a new super yarn fiber that has anti-static and antimicrobials built directly into the fibers themselves, for example. And then also, because we're part of a larger organization called the Sport Group, we have a global presence. So we have manufacturing that occurs, of course, like I said, domestically, but we also have plants in Europe and also in Australia. And we have plans to bring on the first ever recycling center for our industry in 2022. That said, we have been using our recycled synthetic turf in products such as perimeter board, which I'll explain in a few moments as well. We've been doing that since 2020. So these are just a few of the pieces, I think, that make SYNLawn very valuable and provide us credentials as we talk through our conversation today. So we make this crazy plastic grass, right? And it's really exciting to us, but to people out in the field or to my public, to the public, or even to my wife and kids, or my dog even, they might not understand all those things. So we really designed from 4 different pillars. First of all is the aesthetics. So unlike the artificial turf used in the athletic world, we have a different set of criteria that we need to use. So aesthetics ranks very, very high. I can't have turf that's very shiny. It's got to look realistic. It's got to feel good, even though it's under my feet. The color makes a really big difference. And even the color of the thatch is very important. So we use a tan thatch, which gives it a more realistic and natural look. The stewardship, we'll cover that throughout the presentation, but we've been doing this stewardship thing for a very long time. We take it very seriously, and we practice the environmental stewardship and just transparency with our products, putting them online, sharing throughout the world and throughout all the communication medium that we can, the different ways that we impact the environment. The third leg that we really design around is the craftsmanship side. And this is really oriented around the distributor. Our distributor network are the ones who purchase the rolls of turf and really do the magic of making synthetic turf look great out in the field. So they do the design work, they do the cuts around stone, they put in the paver strips, they figure out how to haul the synthetic turf up to the top of the roof, all of that sort of thing. And so we've got to create products that make sense for them as well. And then finally, performance. If we were in person, I'd show you red colored turf, turf with pad on it, white turf, all sorts of different shades of green, some tall, some not, some scratchy, some made out of nylon and fire resistant, so on and so forth. But each of those 38 SKUs that we use really has a specific performance associated with it. So very quickly, just to explain how turf is created and installed, we'll start with the installation portion of it. First of all, the synthetic turf is put onto basically a 15-foot wide sewing machine. So the rolls come out in 15-foot widths, and they can be about 100 or 150 feet in length. So they're very large, very heavy. They take a lot of grunting labor. So as those are brought to the site and set aside, the site itself is prepared by excavating out any of the extraneous material that we don't need, and then backfilled with larger stones. So typically it's about 3/4 of an inch to an inch stone, so 57 or 59 stone, for example, and then we top dress with a finer layer. Every region will be a little bit different. The sandy soils will differ quite a bit from clay soils. They can even differ from state to state. So there's a lot of complexity to this, and that's why we rely on the distributor network and their relationships with architects and designers out in the field to make those fine-tune adjustments. So the base material is prepared. It's compacted, so you have a nice drainage bed. The turf is rolled out. It's staked along the perimeter. Sometimes it's attached to a perimeter board. And then we use equipment called power brooms, and that brushes back the fibers of the turf itself, and we drop in infill. And infill is very important. It regulates the flow of water. So if you think about it from a national perspective, you don't want water going through too slow, nor do you want it going through too fast. The infill also acts as a ballast. So we are a ballasted system. You're typically using 2 to 3 pounds per square foot of infill, and so it really holds itself in place, and that leads to something called dimensional stability. So if you think about a tablecloth, let's say on a table, you don't want it to wrinkle up or shift or move. So part of what we're doing is we're creating a very solid system that's designed to last for decades, quite frankly. And that's where that infill really plays a role. Infill also these days can have special qualities to it. So they can have additional antimicrobial qualities or even cooling. Or in the case of dog parks, you have some products that bind with bacteria so you don't get the urine odor that you would in these very high traffic pet boarding facilities. So in a nutshell, that's how synthetic turf is installed. If you were to look straight down on synthetic turf, you'll see that there's a variety of blade shapes, and this graphic here represents that. In the beginning years, we would tend to use either a flat blade shape like you see on the far right-hand side, but we recognized that tended to behave a little bit like a window, and it was somewhat flimsy and would kind of fold over. And so by shifting to some more of these extruded shapes like an S or a soft diamond or a ribbed pattern or an omega blade or C-shaped blade, it really added a lot of durability to the product itself. And then it also aids in light refraction, so it looks duller in appearance. It gives you a more natural look. So of course, both of those components are very important as we're talking about sustainability as well, because again, if you didn't have those components in place, if that wasn't part of that system, you really wouldn't have that much of a business. So nobody wants products that look real shiny and aren't gonna hold up over time. A little bit about turf anatomy, because I know that not all of you will know very much about synthetic turf. So again, if you had a piece in front of you, the large fibers that you would typically run your hand along, those are called the face fibers. They can be multiple colors, they can be bundled differently. They're very complex to create in our world. In addition to the face fiber, you'll have, if you kind of separated them and you peered through, you're going to see thatch fibers, and these are little curlicue fibers. Again, in our industry, they tend to be tan. We also have ones that are green, and they're really there to kind of capture and to hold that infill and keep it in place. And they also provide kind of a natural look, and then also hold up the fibers themselves. So they have kind of a supporting feature to them. As you look underneath that turf, with a SYNLawn turf, you're going to see that it has a two-part backing. We call it a primary and a secondary. And so the fibers themselves they're on spools. They look like giant spools of yarn. They get fed through that 15-foot wide sewing machine that I told you about and tufted in. Well, those tufts, as they pass through that backing, they also have to be secured or locked in. So you'll see our green backing there coats those stitch rows, and that provides you a very uniform and strong body that's not going to be pulled through. A final note here is with the drainage perforations. A lot of people don't recognize that synthetic turf has holes in it, so you can't make it too porous, otherwise you have a flimsy backing and it's not going to hold up and you lose that dimensional stability. But our drainage perforations allow water to pass through at a rate of 1,200 inches per hour. So if you think about the last rainstorm that you may have had in your area, whether you're in Phoenix or whether you're in Massachusetts, you understand that the drainage is very important. But 1,200 inches an hour is quite a bit of water passing through, and so you can imagine that if you had too much more than that, you'd be really having some flooding on the scale of Noah's Ark, right? So what is artificial turf? Well, it's not your mama's grass or maybe even your grandma's grass, right? We may be familiar with on the back of a porch kind of a thing. It tends to be a bright green. It's falling apart, that sort of thing. So what we do at SYNLawn is we engage with a lot of sustainable manufacturing processes. So because of our size, we can leverage the raw materials. And these raw materials will take a year to negotiate in advance. They're tied into our forecasting, the forecasting of turf and when they arrive and all those kinds of things. So it's a very fine-tuned event that goes on. But those raw materials are really what lead to two different types of fiber that we use. One is a polyethylene and one is a nylon product. Polyethylene is very common out there. Nylon is a lot tougher to make, a lot tougher to get a hold of and control, but it also has some really cool qualities, such as a very high melt point. So when we talk about rooftop products, and if you want to pass fire code, you'd want to look to a nylon product. Same with golf. Golf is a very finicky kind of a surface. You want to make sure that it's durable, that the ball rolls in a very true sort of a fashion. And so that's why we opt for a nylon surface when it comes to that kind of a performance. So we do all this with something called a master batch. And the master batch, I tell folks, is a lot like the original recipe. It's the difference between making a cake from scratch versus a box cake. Okay. And that allows us to have consistent manufacturing growth. You obviously don't want machines to shut down and that business to fold. Otherwise, that's going to lead to other kinds of problems. You need a very strong network of distributors that continues to thrive and grow. And of course, you also need those consistent and substantial construction systems. So we'll be talking through some of that as well, because we've dealt with so many different construction types, from rooftop to putting greens to multifamily and everything in between. It allows us to have a lot more leverage throughout the industry. We're really an organization that's designed for designers. Like I said previously, we have 38 active SKUs. We're in a number of commercial fields, which really kind of pushes the boundaries of what we do. We have the strongest documentation in the market. If you're looking for CSIs, those 13-page documents that tell you what to expect and how to install it, right? If you're looking for specifications, you can go to MasterSpec or BSD, or you can contact your local SYNLawn distributor and they'll be able to readily pull those out for you, whether it's a spec sheet or even more additional detail. We have, speaking of detail, we have over 200 CAD drawings, and we also have three-dimensional modeling as well. So we understand that a lot of times people are approaching synthetic turf in a very new kind of a way, and so it allows us to just kind of pull something out that we've already done, or maybe done in another part of the country, and we can dialogue with that. So let's talk about water for a few moments. We all know that water is a very precious resource. In some countries, in some areas of the country, it's more important than others, right? Or at different times of the year even. So again, just to use the analogy of my own residence, I don't have irrigation, and so it doesn't have the same kind of impact on me as it does for municipalities or golf courses that use a ton of water, or hospitality that, of course, has to have a great looking front entrance, right? Well, some of the problem with water, besides it being a precious resource and being limited in certain areas of the country, is that it's very costly to maintain. About 50% of water usage from irrigation is lost either to evaporation, direct evaporation, or to runoff, as you see here. And this is just a regular old photo, not one that's doctored up, right? So I think we've all seen those occasions, or even when you've got the irrigation going on in the middle of a rainstorm. So water plays a very important role for each of our guys. It's one of the first things that we look at. So where does the drainage need to go? What does the current drainage look like? If I excavate down, how far do I need to go? And so those are some of the first things that we look at. And it can be illustrated by a project such as this, the Crystal Lagoon project. This is based near Houston. It's a favorite of mine just because it introduces a lot of the complexity when we talk about sustainability. So they created this environment for the community. It was a very expensive filtration system, and they knew that they couldn't go with natural grass. The natural grass was going to have to get mowed and cut, and the debris was going to get in the water. Of course, you're going to want to take care of that. So you need to fertilize it, add pesticides, so on and so forth. And then that also can get into the water. So they really wanted to go the direction of synthetic turf. It needed to be highly commercialized and durable. So again, that's where we could step in because we have so much experience in this field. We have some incredibly durable products that are made just for this kind of application. Another benefit is that you're able to extend the season or extend the time that people are actually on these surfaces. And that's also very important when you're determining ROI and sustainability. So we've all seen those places that are about as natural as you can get. They just happen to be dirt and they run off all the time, right? And so that's not a very attractive kind of scenario. And so you can imagine in a location like this, they're able to extend their season at the front end and also at the back end. So that's also a very important feature when we talk about ROI and sustainability. A lot of times we run into situations like this. This is a project in Pittsburgh. Or rather Philadelphia. It was a underserved or underprivileged neighborhood, if you will. A lot of cement there. They saw all the cool new playgrounds that other people were getting, and so they raised some money and decided they wanted to do the same thing. There's typically some very strong limitations when it comes to excavating, and so this is kind of a typical scenario that our guys have to work with. The project, believe it or not, was completed. It's a pretty cool one, actually, and really serves these children in a really unique and special way. So you'll hear me be very proud about our distributors and very proud of our projects, because to me, it's these kinds of situations like this that really make our product shine and can really make me proud of the organization that we belong to and what we do. So, and I don't think there's a whole lot of products that do that. So we are able to do a lot of really neat stuff. I mentioned before that we have a systems-based approach. You'll see from these three-dimensional models here that you can have very simplistic systems that are just a basic landscaping to a landscaping that might abut a hardscape or a hard edge like a curb and require some additional drainage in a unique way. So an example might be like a pet area, pet park, right, or an indoor pet area. And then you can also have very advanced high-tech rooftops. Some of these rooftops, you can be satisfying an 18-inch void or so. You can have electric and gas and lighting and everything else running underneath. You have slopes that you also have to account for. Some of them will collect gray water. In any event, they can be quite complex, and so we make sure that we address it in a holistic sort of a way. So when we talk about sustainable systems, again, you've heard me talk about this approach where synthetic turf solves a lot of problems that you wouldn't necessarily solve without it. And so the playground image at the top there is a great example of it. It's a nearby school where my wife and I walk our dogs, and we would see this every day. In fact, we still do years later. Right? And so the children aren't going to come out and play on this kind of stuff. It's not the kind of thing that you can be really, really proud of. And so synthetic turf is able to come in and extend that playing time, get more kids out there. And that's why I said that a lot of times our systems or the sustainability conversation will include a lot with wellness as well. Safety, compliance, and documentation. Again, this is just kind of a great segue here. Your playground documentation, the safety that you need for that is going to be very different than what you would need for a rooftop, or quite frankly, what you would need in my backyard, right? I just need something that the dogs can go to the bathroom on and that we go out and look at, and it looks fantastic. Well, when you're talking about kids or kids falling off of equipment or trip hazards or ADA compliance, all of that changes quite a bit. We also have sustainable systems in the sense that they provide LEED credit and USDA certified systems. So we have 12 USDA systems, certified systems. We're very proud of those. So thank you for our technical product manager for making all of that kind of good stuff happen. In terms of the LEED credits, we typically will add anywhere from 8 to 12 credits per project. Sometimes it can be as much as 25, but that's a pretty good figure to kind of wrap your head around. And again, replicable construction and credibility. So whether you have a series of automotive dealerships or a hotel like the Aulani here in the Disney Aulani in Honolulu, all of that makes a real big difference, because you're not going to keep on redesigning products and systems that fail. So we use a lot of bio-based components, as I've been talking about. We've been doing this for quite some time. You can see the extruded pellets there in the upper left-hand corner, and that gets extruded into the fibers themselves. They go through cooling baths. They go through plastic tubing to keep them free of debris and such, and then fed into that sewing machine that I mentioned earlier. So because we can control all of that, It allows us to create some really cool products that have key advancements, like the super yarn that I told you about. We're able to control the supply chain, so we don't have the PFAs and lead content and other items like that that are very controversial and very problematic in the industry. And then it's allowed us to get some really neat projects like the NASA project here. That's actually a logo made of turf, celebrating the Apollo spaceship in their flight last year. They've gone on to include the synthetic turf around it. We use synthetic turf on viewing platforms that they have, so on and so forth. So it's really neat stuff. In fact, we just got approved for some by the city, for some projects that could go through wetlands. So obviously wetlands are a very precious resource, especially in the Northeast, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and such. And so being able to have products that satisfy those USDA regulations and certifications are very critical to us. Sustainable programs, getting the right support for your best results. It's obviously in your best interest to work with distributorships who are very strong in what they do. And so we put a lot of our time into making sure that we have very robust and strong groups out there to service projects that you may have in mind. And that includes third-party and complementary products. So third-party products might be something like the artificial living wall or pour-in-place projects that we have. They can also be sundries, such as the perimeter board or the edging board that I told you about earlier. When you install a project, well, we actually can take turf scraps and extrude that, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and so we can recycle or upcycle our own scraps and turn it into something really cool. So that's an example of third-party or complementary products. We also have the largest U.S. network of offices. So again, we have 100 here in the United States, whether you're looking at projects in Houston or West Virginia or even Alaska. We've got some really cool stuff. And it's not so much to pat ourselves on the back, but it's really to talk about the scaled experience that we have. Everybody's got some really cool construction expertise that they're able to bring to the table. It also allows us to adopt new markets in a more full way. So an example of that might be mall spaces. We've been doing a lot of work with malls as they're trying to attract traffic, bring in foot traffic, keep families and people engaged there, and then also to keep those communities alive and vibrant. So again, that goes back to that whole sustainability conversation and wellness and how they can all start intermixing very quickly. Financing and ROI. So talking about interlinking, ROI is essentially linked to sustainability. You can't have one without the other. So I can put a product in the ground, and if I only have it in there for a year, that's going to be one kind of a figure. If I have it in for 2 decades, that's going to be a very different kind of a figure. And so that's also very important in our business. So again, we're trying to create products and projects that are going to last a lifetime of what you need it to be. In terms of financing, because it does cost money to put in synthetic turf, there's an upfront investment. So it's a little bit like I tell people, like putting in a pool or putting on a rooftop, so you're going to feel a little bit in your wallet, or you can, but it's very important that you get your projects done the right way, and that the ROI is actually very, very quick on it. So it tends to be about 2 to 4 years, depending on the use that you have intended for it. But in terms of the financing, we have 2 commercial financing programs. One is cooperative purchasing, another is through PNC financing. And then we have a residential financing program as well through Wells Fargo. Again, it's a well-known, well-branded name that we felt that we could hitch ourselves to, and that it would be meaningful in the marketplace. So all 3 of those programs are really designed to get you the best kind of project that you want, that you can get in the market. I told you before about a parent company called Sport Group. They're based in Europe, and again, they're the ones who are developing the recycling center that we're expecting to have come online in 2022 here in the United States. They do significant investment. So again, I'm talking about programs here. So they recognize the longevity of our brand and what we're trying to do. And so they really took about 3 years to develop our super yarn product that's really taken the market by storm. We're also connected in with AstroTurf, like I was telling you about, Recordtan, which does a lot with the Olympic tracks. and highly professional tracks, and then also Lakehold, which is well known in tennis. And so all four of our brands working in concert provide both performance and leisure surfacing for whatever your need would be. In terms of sustainable projects, again, you're going to put these down, the synthetic turf down, and you want it to last for the most amount of time possible. So rooftops are a great example. You can get your fire class rating. We have nylon turf that is melt proof, and so you can see in the upper right hand corner there that building with those bank of windows. This is a project in the Carolinas called Dimensional Place, and all those windows can cast a reflective light. Well, if you don't have the right turf, if you don't use nylon and you use a polyethylene, you can really start experiencing some melting problems. So we take those kinds of things into consideration, and that's you got to have that longevity, right? Who wants to put in a rooftop and have it melt on you? And of course the rooftops offer an extended use of space, which is very important. So I've had the privilege of looking at some of these cityscapes from the air, and you can see all those buildings that just have standard HVAC equipment on top of them, or it's an unused surface. Well, by reworking that surface and making it amenable for residents or for people to enjoy, or like I said earlier, pet parks, you really extend the value of the project itself. Interstitial or hard to reach spaces. These are very important. Again, in urbanscapes, people are looking to get out and enjoy the outdoors. And so with synthetic turf, you can create these spaces that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. Interactive environments. So again, this is a little bit of a different twist here, but for seniors, for example, they're going to be looking to play golf. It's very important for fine motor skills and sociability, especially as it relates to Alzheimer's. But that's a different kind of a conversation than you have with with a third grader who's going to fall off the top of a piece of equipment. And so the interactive environments really force us to look at the different systems that are being put in, and again, create the ones that have the best longevity. Sometimes we get the opportunity to reuse or recover a particular space. So on the right-hand side, you see this is one hole out of 9 that are going in for a resort in West Virginia. And so we're able to repurpose this area. We're able to address slopes and erosion control in ways that you couldn't before. And we do this whether it's with golf, and we're able to take all the water usage out of a normal golf course, if you will. Or like you see in the middle left-hand photo, that's Washington Square Park in New York City. This is an area that also needed to be recovered. It was just simply dirt. There's a very high homeless population there. It was kind of dangerous at nighttime, and so the city really engaged with our local group there to create a very highly interactive space. I had the privilege of being out there in the evening a couple years ago, and you could still see people playing 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So it's really neat. Sustainable design. So we're really talking about extending your palette. It might be through multiple applications. We can extend your palette by offering up the blogs and the documentations, et cetera, to support your designs. We have prefabricated logos. This is something that we do in conjunction with our sister company, AstroTurf. And so, we can use the NASA logo, or we can, put in your school's logo, Hilton logo, ADA compliance, whatever it is that you would need. That's a big part of what we do. We've seen a lot of this for agility and fitness centers, for example, is ways just to stand out and brand themselves. We're also very simple and universal. So the idea is that we can make it really easy to work with us. And so if you go onto our website and you go onto the commercial tab, you can pull down our CAD details. You can also reach out to your local distributor, who again can adjust those details for some of the regional differences that they may have. Or you can even visit us on MasterSpec or BSD Spec Link, find key commercial specifications, pull them down, and keep moving on. In terms of life cycles and ROI, we offer a limited lifetime warranty on our products. We know that they're going to last for decades, so we're not afraid to do that, and we really try to put teeth in there to give you assurances that the project is going to last for a long time. Our local distributors have a local workmanship warranty. Of course, we support them and we want them around. If you ever have a problem with a project or a seam comes up or you have an addition or something like that, that's where the local distributor can really come into play. And having somebody solid who's been there for a long time makes a real big difference. And then finally, I talked about the systems-based approach and how your ROI is typically 2 to 4 years. It'll really depend on how much use you get out of it, right? So my backyard is going to have a very different ROI if it's just me, my wife, and my dogs, compared to, say, a playground where you're always putting kids out on it. You'll get your money back a lot quicker. So I've got a few photos just to share some of that. Again, sustainability story and how that links with wellness and so on and so forth. We've seen a lot of work with mounds occurring in the last 10 years or so, particularly in the last 2 years. It seems like everybody wants one. They're custom built. They can be quite complex, like this conjoining mound. So this is about 6 or 7 feet high. This is also based in Texas. They use a low, tight, dense product, which, by the way, is ADA compliant. The product itself is. However, I'll just make a note here that the ADA compliance is also dependent on the surroundings, right? So, you know, the curb and the EWF and everything like that, the engineered wood fiber makes it difficult to have wheelchairs go through or if somebody falls. Historic spaces. This is the Versace Mansion based in Miami, Florida. They do a lot of European sunbathing. They do have gold that's integrated into the tile work here. And so, of course, you don't want to have a whole bunch of mowers and tree cutters and people kind of invading this little space. And so this is a great way that they could use synthetic turf, create a very simple solution that really kept to the atmosphere, the elegance of that. Now it's a boutique hotel. A lot of times we'll do happenings. This is a blue synthetic turf that we use for the standard hotel. We do all the work for the standard hotels throughout the country. So it's a real great way of attracting people, getting people engaged, not just with our product, but, you know, socialization. And that's very important. Multifamily roof decks. Again, you're talking about systems that are sustainable. This is on the 3rd or 4th floor of a multifamily complex based in Colorado. You see here the design itself is very strong with the circularity, the triangles, the strong linear composition. It's just a real cool project to see in person. And so the synthetic turf portion of it was actually a very small segment. It was built on a slope. I don't know if you can see it from this particular photo here, but what you can see are those reflection marks. And so if the salesman and if the team had not put in nylon turf, then you would have melt on this project, which would obviously be very disruptive and frustrating. And so by doing it right the first time, you create this real sustainable environment that's gorgeous, that everybody can use, everybody is safe, and it really extends the value of the project itself. This is a project based in Cleveland, Ohio that we're particularly proud of. It won last year's Commercial Project of the Year with the Synthetic Turf Council. It was a dog park at about 22,000 square feet. It has both a large dog area and small dog area. And it was actually put in by the city there. And it's just really cool. We're very proud of it. I'm very proud of our distributor up there as well. Who is a second generation leader for that organization. She's fantastic. We have a lot of female leadership within our distributor network, and we're very proud of that feature as well. Veteran and athletic parks. So I'm skipping over some of the basic playgrounds that we do a ton of day in, day out. This is one that I'm particularly proud of in New Jersey. Or Washington, D.C. rather, and it incorporates a brand of equipment that we're very familiar with and work with quite frequently. But more importantly, this is organized around seniors coming out and using that equipment in conjunction with their Fitbits or their iWatches to monitor their health. So it creates a very safe, secure place where they can go and live their best life, right? But this is very important for the senior and independent living communities. So that's what I've got for you today. I really appreciate your time. We'll take a few moments here and field any questions that you may have. If you want to reach out to us, please look up your local SYNLawn distributor, reach out to me directly, or just take a look at our website. In terms of next steps, if you wanted to reach out and ask for a lunch and learn for your firm or organization, if you wanted to look at our specifications, again, you can find them online or you can find them through MasterSpec or BSD Spec Link. Don't hesitate to reach out at any given time. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Rob, thank you so much for that great presentation. As a reminder to everybody that is on the line, we're going to move into the Q&A period now, so you have the opportunity to actually interact with Rob and get your questions answered one-on-one. So if you have not already, we do have quite a few questions in the queue, but if you haven't already, go ahead and type any questions that you still have in the left-hand side of your screen in the Q&A box, and then hit the submit button, and we will get to as many as we possibly can live, but if we don't get to your question, we will pass all of these along to Rob so he can reach out to you directly if it makes sense to do so. So Rob, are you still with me?
Yes, I am. I'm right here. So thank you very much, first of all, for everybody attending and listening. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being with us. So Rob, we're going to start off with a couple of quick, easy questions, and then we'll move into some of the more complex ones. So the first one comes from Ben, and it is, are your products permeable?
Yes, they certainly are. If we were in person, and I know that we're not, but if we were in person, you flipped over the back of our turf, you would see a bunch of holes spaced every 4 inches or 6 inches, depending on the style that we have. But typically, they pass water through by about a rate of 1,200 inches per hour, so they're certainly permeable. The exception being I would say the exception would be a putting green material. So typically that is not permeable because you don't want water traveling through directly to the base. That would provide divots, and so as the ball would travel across the surface, you wouldn't want that.
Fair enough. The next question actually comes from Susan, and that is, what is the SRI range for a typical synthetic turf?
Hey, Susan, thank you very much for your question. So I'm not quite sure what the application would be. We do have SRI ranges of 9.8 to 12.5. Typically, it depends on the type of blade shape that you're using. You may recall in the presentation we had about 6 or 7 different blade shapes, and those contribute quite a bit to both the optical side of SRI and then also the convection coefficient itself. So 9.8 to 12.5 would be a typical range.
Okay, thank you. And our next question is, can we store rainwater underneath the turf to address SWM requirements, and have you used it anywhere in the U.S.?
That's also a great question. It's actually the first time that I've received that particular question. So SWM is stormwater management. Those are, I believe, typically organized through the EPA and that sort of thing. What we normally see with gray water collection would be on the rooftops, and it depends on the amount of space in between the TPO or the roofing membrane and the height of the turf itself. So in some locations, like New York, you can have anywhere from a 12-inch to maybe an 18-inch void in that space, and so a lot of people will collect up rainwater that way or run piping through, et cetera. And then in other areas of the country, it's a thinner profile. In some cases, we even do a very thin membrane. So it depends a little bit about on the system that you're using. I do know that in the past 8 months or so that Pittsburgh and Philadelphia in particular have been tasked with some of this gray water or rainwater harvesting in their rooftop designs. So I don't see it uniformly throughout the United States, but I know that it does occur. And you could always reach out to us and put you in touch with those people too.
Thanks, Rob. Just one more prong of that question. Are there any agency approvals like the EPA or any state or local environmental agencies?
No, and thank you for following up with that. No, we do not have any on our end. Not that we couldn't get them, but your question actually just kind of sparked a memo for me to go ahead and pursue that and see what we can get. But we do not have anything currently.
All right, thank you. Okay, guys, just a reminder, you can continue to enter questions. There are quite a few more coming in. So Brittany actually asked, do SYNLawn products require adhesives? If so, does SYNLawn have, sorry, my screen jumped. Let's talk about the adhesives first.
Okay. So we use adhesives when we join two pieces together. So you remember from the presentation that we synthetic turf typically comes in 15-foot widths, and so when we design a project, we try to minimize those seams, if you will, and those seams will use a seaming cloth or a seaming tape, and we put a very strong adhesive on there so it doesn't separate.
Okay.
That joins the pieces together.
Gotcha, Rob. And the other part of that question was, do you have adhesive products, or what, or do you use other manufacturers? Do you work with other manufacturers on that actual seam?
Maybe I'm not understanding the question entirely. So we would use an adhesive that we purchase from a third party. So we have vendor relationships like that allow us to to get those products, and so our distributors would typically purchase them, use the adhesives to join the two pieces together as part of the installation process. So that's just all part of what they would do for a typical installation.
Perfect. I think that definitely answered it.
Okay.
Thank
you. Yes, so that would be part of our process.
Perfect. All right, so next, Doug asked, how hot does the turf get in the summer sun?
That's a great question. So synthetic turf is a plastic, and as everybody knows, plastic can warm up. From manufacturer to manufacturer, the differences in how they address temperature concerns can be quite a bit. And then also the type of turf fiber that you would use makes a really big difference, and then of course the regions of the country. So a polyethylene fiber will start to, we call it soften, but it'll warm up and it'll start to soften at about 180 degrees. Nylon turfs will start to melt at about 430 degrees or start to soften. And so those are some extreme benchmarks, is typically what I tell architects. At 120 degrees is when we as people start taking our foot off of a surface. It might be a cement sidewalk, it might be a slide, synthetic turf, whatever. So 120 degrees is where we start to feel it. Some areas of the country, of course, you're going to have more of that sun pounding on it throughout the day, and so you can either use shade structures. You can use the specialty infills that I mentioned in the presentation itself that actually cool the synthetic turf. And then what we do as a manufacturer is, because we control the master batch, like I talked about, we include additives into the fibers that disallow the sun and the UV to penetrate the fiber as much. So our turf fibers tend to be cooler than other manufacturers. We have two infill products that work in conjunction with that fiber technology that I was just telling you about. One of them is called T-Cool. So this is a product that is a super absorbent polymer, and what it does is it grabs moisture from the air and it slowly releases it, cooling the surface down. So it's a very natural product. Also, as another byproduct, it has antimicrobial as well. That T-infill that I was mentioning, that will cool surface temperatures anywhere from 30 to 50 degrees. It really does depend on where you're located and the amount of heat that's being introduced into the system. Another one we have is called EnviroFill. That's also antimicrobial, and that also cools the synthetic turf surface as well. It's a great question. Because we do so many commercial projects, one of the first things that we do is we like to have the distributor do a site review and see what they're looking at. So, if you're composing on top of a rooftop, that's one kind of a scenario that we take into consideration. If you're working in between two buildings and you've got a playground with kids in between those two buildings, that's a different kind of a scenario. So it's really important that we take a look at those projects.
Just following up on that, Rob, you answered probably 4 questions that are in the queue if you're talking about infills, so thank you. One follow-up, though, did just come through from Doug, and he was just asking what is exactly is the EnviroFill made of?
It's a ceramic coated polymer, and I can get you more information on that too. If you just message me separately, I can send you over some of the specification and MSDS information as well. Same with T-Cool.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of questions that came in as you were talking about infill, so you may need to follow up with some of those directly, but I think you covered a lot of it.
Sure.
Simple one I think that's in here is, go ahead.
If I can just add real quickly about the infill as well. Normally we're looking for a rounded sand. So the idea is that when you put in infill, you don't want a compacted sand, like a play sand that I could get from a Lowe's or Home Depot. So that's not what we do. We're looking for a rounded sand that behaves kind of like a gumball machine, if you will, so the water can percolate through. So in the case of T-Cool and EnviroFill, they'll take a coating and wrap it around that sand, basically, and that gives you those additive benefits. So I just throw that out there too. Maybe that'll help out a little bit.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump a little bit here. We had one question that came in a little bit ago that I skipped over, and it was asking about the warranty on the product for things like finish, color, that sort of stuff.
Sure. That's a great question. And we understand that warranties can be kind of gimmicky. So what we did is we started out with the end user and the end user's project. So what was a warranty for a hotel going to look like, and what would give you some teeth basically to it. So we have a limited lifetime warranty, and the reason we do a limited lifetime is actually, I don't know of too many synthetic turf projects on the landscape side that are pulled out. So typically they're in for 2 or 3 decades even. And what we did is we created a warranty that would always carry a certain amount of residual value to it. So it's about 15% residual value. So at the end of 30 years or your career, whichever came first, you could always come back to us and you could say, hey, look, I want to replace this. I understand you've got some upgraded turf. How do we go about doing that? And so that's kind of what we organize the warranty around, that kind of thinking. In terms of the blade degradation and things like that, and fading, et cetera, that really doesn't happen with synthetic turf. So it's not like you stick it out there in the hot sun and 5 years later it looks completely different and bleaches out white. That's not something that we see in our industry. We also supplement our lifetime warranties through our network of local distributors, and this is very important to us as an organization as well. We don't want just 2 guys in a truck throwing some stuff in the ground and leaving you high and dry. So it's really important to us that we invest deeply in our distributor network, that we build those relationships. We do a lot of site visits with our guys to make sure that they're installing correctly. If there's any issues or concerns, we come out, we meet with them as well on those kinds of things. And so those workmanship warranties are really there to protect those jobs immediately. Normally, if there's a problem with synthetic turf, you're going to see that problem emerge within the first couple months or the first season. And the reason I say that is if, for example, a seam hasn't been put in correctly, or something was forgotten, or you want to go around a tree in a different way, we can address that very quickly through the workmanship warranty. If the base is not compacted correctly, or starts to come loose for whatever reason, we can address that. We can address that too. But as far as the manufacturer's warranty, it's a limited lifetime.
Awesome. Thank you. We do have a few more questions left, Rob, and we are quickly running out of time. So I'm going to throw one more out, but feel free to skim them and let me know if there's any more you'd like to sneak in here. This one comes from Katrina, and it's about the soy-based underlayer, the base that you have. Have there been any issues with attracting rodents that eat the soy-based materials?
That's a great question. No, not had that. So maybe our soy doesn't taste very good. I'm not sure. We do sometimes in certain parts of the country get rodents underneath, and so we'll put barriers for rodent control. It's a great question.
I thought that was an interesting one. And then we
Yeah.
had a question come in from Kim a little while ago asking if your products are tested to be CPDH version 1.1 or newer for VOC emissions.
The actual designation I would have to look up for you. We do have a VOC emissions test. It's based on ASTM D5116. So I'm not sure if that's compatible with what you're looking at. That's a simple chamber test, and we have passed that. And I can forward that VOC document to you if you need it. I do see a question here about pet parts and urine. That might be a good one to address. Is that possible? Or are we running out of time?
We are very close to time, but go ahead, take that one, and then we'll wrap right after that.
Okay, perfect. So I've got 5 dogs at my personal home, and the kind of infill and the kind of turf that I would use would differ than, say, a high traffic, multifamily or boarding facility kind of a thing. So typically, what we would use for a high traffic pet area, it would be a low, tight, dense product. So you don't want anything really soft that's going to, be mushy, if you will. The urine itself will pass through the weep holes in the bottom that I mentioned. But when it comes to high traffic dog situations, we do a few things differently. So of course you want to evacuate the liquid as quickly as possible. You also want to use a different kind of an infill that will actually bind with the bacteria, and that's really what gives you that smelly odor, right? So it's not that the turf is bad, it's just that you smell the stuff. So it can be kind of gross. And so the infill that we would use there would be different than the EnviroFill or the T-Cool that I mentioned. I would also say that because, of course, speaking as a pet owner, these high traffic areas, we always recommend third-party products like ProVet Logic or even another product called WYSIWASH, because you really want to create the cleanest, safest environment for those pets and animals. Not just get rid of the smell, but really be able to assure the pet owner that you've got the best and most perfect and cleanest surface.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, we are a little bit over time, so we're going to have to go ahead and wrap up. I want to just thank Rob again for his time. This was so informative, and thank you to everyone who stayed on the line with us and asked those questions and interacted. We so much appreciate it. Just a reminder for everyone that is still with us, GreenBuild is taking place September 21st to the 23rd in sunny San Diego, California, where we will have more sessions, including 4 keynotes and upwards of 100 education sessions. If you aren't able to join us live in person in San Diego, we also have full virtual packages available, so you can tune in conveniently from any location. As a special thank you for joining today's webinar, GreenBuild is offering attendees $50 off any paid education package related to the show, and you activate that using the code SYNLawn, that's SYNLAWN, when you register. Register by July 15th to also secure your early bird pricing. Again, Rob, thank you so much for your time today. Just a reminder to everyone, we will be sending out the link to this recording tomorrow. So thank you all and have an excellent day.
Thank you.